Have you ever noticed something strange about yourself? Around your friends, you can talk naturally, make jokes, say whatever comes to your mind, and act completely comfortable. But put you in front of someone you genuinely like, and suddenly everything changes. You become more careful with your words. You think twice before sending a message. You might laugh more than usual, become unusually quiet, or suddenly become very aware of how you look, how you sound, and even what your hands are doing. The interesting part is that you haven't consciously decided to become a different person. Your behavior simply starts changing. And this happens to both girls and boys more often than people realize. So why does attraction have this strange effect on ordinary behavior? One reason is that when you like someone, the interaction becomes more personally meaningful. A normal conversation with a stranger usually has very little emotional weight. If the conversation goes badly, you simply move on. But when you care about how a particular person sees you, the same conversation can suddenly feel much more important. Your attention becomes focused not only on what the other person is saying, but also on how you are being perceived. You might start wondering whether your joke was actually funny, whether your message sounded too eager, or whether you should have said something differently. The conversation is happening in the present, but part of your attention is busy monitoring yourself. This is why someone who is normally confident can suddenly become awkward around a person they like. Confidence hasn't necessarily disappeared. Their attention has simply become divided. Instead of focusing entirely on the conversation, they are also evaluating themselves while the conversation is happening. Imagine trying to give a presentation while simultaneously watching yourself from the audience. You would probably become less natural. Something similar can happen during attraction. You become both the person having the conversation and the person observing your own performance. This can look completely different from one person to another. One boy might become unusually talkative around a girl he likes, telling more stories and making more jokes than normal. Another might become quiet because he is carefully choosing what to say. One girl might become more playful and expressive around someone she likes, while another might become more reserved because she doesn't want to feel exposed. There isn't one universal behavior that proves attraction. People respond differently depending on personality, confidence, experience, and the specific situation. Sometimes attraction can even make people behave in ways that surprise themselves. Someone who normally doesn't care much about their appearance might suddenly spend extra time choosing what to wear before seeing a particular person. Someone who rarely checks their phone might become more aware of messages from that person. Someone who usually speaks without hesitation might suddenly rewrite a simple text several times. These behaviors aren't necessarily signs of insecurity. They can simply reflect the fact that the interaction has become emotionally important. There is another interesting reason people change around someone they like. They often want to show the best version of themselves. This doesn't automatically mean pretending to be someone else. In healthy social situations, people naturally adjust how they present themselves depending on who they are with. You might speak differently with your grandparents than with your closest friends. You might behave differently at work than at a party. Attraction can make this natural process much stronger because you care more about creating a positive impression. For example, imagine a guy who normally spends his weekends playing video games with friends. He meets someone who loves photography and suddenly becomes more interested in exploring new places. Is he pretending? Not necessarily. Maybe the interaction simply brings out an interest that was already there. On the other hand, if someone constantly changes their opinions, personality, or values just to receive approval, that can eventually become exhausting. There is an important difference between showing different sides of yourself and completely abandoning who you are. This is also why people sometimes become more aware of their strengths and weaknesses around someone they find attractive. When you care about another person's opinion, their presence can act like a mirror. You may suddenly notice things you normally ignore. Maybe you become aware that you speak too quickly when nervous. Maybe you realize you actually enjoy making someone laugh. Maybe you discover that you are more emotionally sensitive than you thought. Attraction can therefore reveal parts of your personality that aren't always obvious in ordinary interactions. But here's where things get especially interesting. Sometimes the person you like doesn't actually make you behave differently because of anything they are doing. The change can come entirely from your interpretation of the situation. They might simply say, "Hey, how are you?" But because you already have feelings for them, the moment carries more meaning for you. You may remember their tone, their expression, or the exact words they used. The same sentence from another person might disappear from your memory almost immediately. This doesn't mean every small action from someone you like has a hidden romantic meaning. In fact, that's an important distinction. When we care about someone, it's easy to give extra significance to ordinary interactions. A smile can simply be a smile. A delayed reply can simply mean someone was busy. A short conversation doesn't automatically reveal someone's feelings. Attraction can make us pay closer attention, but paying attention isn't the same thing as knowing what another person thinks. This is one reason people sometimes feel embarrassed after interacting with someone they like. They replay the conversation later and suddenly notice every little detail. Why did I say that? Why did I laugh like that? Did I sound nervous? Why didn't I think of a better answer? The funny thing is that the other person may not have noticed any of it. What feels enormous from inside your own mind can look completely ordinary from the outside. Think about how different your behavior becomes when you feel completely accepted by someone. After spending more time with a person, you may gradually stop monitoring yourself so intensely. You don't need to carefully choose every sentence. You can sit in silence without feeling uncomfortable. You can make a stupid joke without worrying about whether it was impressive. You can disagree without assuming the relationship is in danger. This transition from self-consciousness to comfort is one of the most interesting parts of human connection. And this is where genuine compatibility becomes more meaningful than trying to perform a perfect personality. If you constantly feel that you have to act like someone else to keep another person's interest, the relationship can become difficult to maintain. But if you can gradually become more relaxed while still respecting each other, something healthier begins to develop. You are no longer simply trying to create an impression. You are allowing the other person to see more of who you actually are. There is also a reason people sometimes become more playful around someone they trust and like. Playfulness can create a feeling of connection because it allows people to interact without everything feeling serious. Teasing, joking, sharing random thoughts, and laughing at small things can all become part of a comfortable relationship. But healthy playfulness still depends on respect. If a joke repeatedly embarrasses or hurts someone, calling it flirting doesn't make it healthy. Genuine connection doesn't require making another person uncomfortable. Over time, attraction can therefore create an interesting journey. At first, you may become more self-conscious. You think carefully about what you say. You notice your appearance more. You analyze interactions. But if the connection develops in a healthy way, that intense self-monitoring can gradually decrease. You start feeling more comfortable. You stop trying so hard to appear impressive. And eventually, you may realize something surprising. The version of yourself that feels most attractive isn't necessarily the most polished version. It is often the version that feels most genuine. So if you've ever wondered why you suddenly become awkward, quiet, talkative, funny, nervous, or unusually careful around someone you like, don't assume something is wrong with you. Attraction can make an ordinary interaction feel personally significant, and that can naturally change where your attention goes. You become more aware of yourself because you care about the outcome. You may try to show your best qualities because their opinion matters to you. And you may notice parts of your personality that don't appear as strongly around other people. But you don't have to turn that into a performance. You don't need to memorize the perfect things to say, imitate a certain personality, or constantly analyze every reaction. The healthiest connection usually develops when both people have room to be real. Attraction may make you more aware of yourself, but genuine connection gives you permission to stop performing. Maybe that's why the most meaningful moment isn't when you finally figure out how to impress someone. It's when you realize you no longer feel the need to impress them every second. You can laugh naturally. You can say something imperfect. You can have an ordinary conversation. You can simply be yourself and still feel comfortable being seen. Because sometimes, acting like a different person around someone you like isn't really about becoming someone else. It's about discovering which parts of yourself appear when someone genuinely matters to you, and learning that the goal isn't to hide the nervousness, but to become comfortable enough that you don't have to hide yourself at all.